2 Timothy chapter 4, starting at verse 6. For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Be diligent to come to me quickly, for Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and has departed to Thessalonica. Crescens of Galatia, Titus of Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful for me for ministry. And Tychicus I have sent to Ephesus. Bring the cloak that I left with Carpus and Troas when you can, and the books, especially the parchments. Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. May the Lord repay him according to his works. You also must be aware of him, for he has greatly resisted our words. At my first offence, no one stood with me, but all forsook me. May it not be charged against them. But the Lord stood with me and strengthened me, so that the message might be preached fully through me, and that all the Gentiles might hear. Also I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion. And the Lord will deliver me from every evil work, and preserve me for his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Greet Prisca and Aquila, and the household of Onesiphorus. Eratus stayed in Corinth, but Trophimus I have left in Miletus sick. Do your utmost to come before winter. Albulus greets you, as well as Pudens, Linus, Claudia, and all the brethren. The Lord Jesus Christ be with you, with your spirit. Grace with you. Amen.
What would you do if you know you just got a few days left? What would you say? What would you write? This is Paul's final words. We don't hear of him after this. And so it's, we looked this morning at the friends. We didn't touch on the last three, Pudens, Linus and Claudia. Linus apparently is the first bishop of Rome, not the Pope, but the first elder in Rome, the first bishop of Rome that was given so towards the end of the first century. And Pudens and Claudia, Pudens, according to a writer called Tacitus, I think it's Tacitus or Tacitus, I'm not quite sure, he records that there was a high-ranking official in the army, Pudens, who married a British princess, Claudia. And she stayed in the house of the former governor of what I suppose we would call the United Kingdom. And in a way but she was a daughter of a king, whatever it was, Cogidinus, something like that. She was sent to Rome and stayed in the former governor of Britannia, I suppose, stayed in her house. And the lady in that house had been renowned, according to the writings of this Tacitus, been known to have been taken before the courts for her heretical beliefs, which would have probably been a Christian. And so Pudens and Linus and Claudia, we never heard of them, but history seems to suggest that they were people of the time. And whether that's the case or what, I don't know. But God's got his people everywhere. God has people everywhere. So it's Paul's final letter. And he writes in verse 5, just before this reading that Phil took, he speaks to Timothy and he just says, "Now Timothy, make full proof of your ministry. Make sure you fulfill it, because mine is drawing to a close. My ministry is ending now. And It would be so easy to think that the church, what they're going to do without Paul? What they're going to do without Peter? What they're going to do without all the apostles? But you see, though the gates of hell shall rail against it, the church shall continue to stand and to continue to grow. It's a flourishing church. Just finished a book today that talked of men of great caliber in our own principality of Wales. And they died within a few years of each other. Half a dozen of them that were considered to be the elder statesmen of preaching within the North and South and Mid Wales. And yet the church continued to grow as they passed away. You see, it is down to an individual. But when that individual goes, then the Lord has got another one to step in and maybe do a different work. Never try to copy, but he turns to Timothy and says, now look, you make sure you fulfill your ministry. Mine's drawing to a close. Verse 6 says this, I am already being poured out. What had been a possibility in that letter that he wrote to the Philippians when he was first imprisoned in Rome? He talks there of the, what's the phrase I've got here? I've got it written down. He anticipated it when he wrote to the Philippians of his life being poured out on a sacrifice. Here, it's actually taking place. I'm being poured out as a drink offering. And with the drink offering, it was always accompanied, or would accompany, a major offering, a burnt offering. Primarily would be a burnt offering, peace offerings. But with the drink offering, all of it would be poured out. Not a bit would be left. Nothing would be left for the priest, nothing at all. It would be completely poured out for God. The hymn writer says, my soul, my life, my all. I am being poured out, Timothy. There are times when you, as a Christian, you can be drained. This is not being drained. This is being poured out. This is where there's an effusion of God's blessing upon an individual's life, and it just pours out from that individual. And he has no wish to retain anything. He wants to give his best to the very end. I am being poured out. Goes on to say, the time of my departure is at hand. It's a lovely phrase, this word departure. It's got so many meanings in everyday language. Jesus would be at complete ease with this word. He could talk to people who were pilgrims in their tents. He could talk to those that were in their ships going across the Mediterranean Sea. He could speak to those who were in prison. He could speak to those who would be in agriculture, because this word is found in all those fields. This word depart or departure, it means it's like the loosing of an ox from its yoke. You can imagine Jesus applying that. Didn't he say it there? Come, take my yoke upon you. He was quite acquainted with the agricultural world. And for Paul, this departure was moving from toiling to resting. This death that he is speaking of here, I am moving from toiling to resting. I am moving from loosing of chains to freedom. From bondage to freedom. The day of my departure is at hand. It's the loosing of ropes in a tent. And so it's moving from traveling to arriving. It's the loosing of the mooring ropes on a ship. Just one more final journey that will take him into eternity. So this term departure is something that Paul is so acquainted with, and Jesus himself would have been acquainted with it. This term of being loosed, of being freed. No more toil, no more bondage, no more traveling. Just one more journey now. That's all that's left. I've been tied to the harbour for so long. A haven of some sort. I've been tied there for so long, but now the ropes are being loosed for one more final journey across the great deep. so he writes in this language, Jesus and Peter, when the New Testament speaks of their death, uses this term Exodus, from the wilderness to the land of promise. What a wonderful way. We are told, aren't we? Death, our greatest enemy. But Jesus has taken it and slain it. He has slain it as David took Goliath's sword and slew the giant. So Jesus took the sword of death by dying himself to conquer it. And now it's a departure for the Christian. It's a loosing, it's a freeing, it's an allowing to come to rest, it's allowing to be free at last. I wonder if a Christian will one day join up and sing with Brother Luther King when he made that great speech. When he comes from the grave, free at last, free at last. Thank God we're free at last. The Christian message is a message of hope. It's a message of hope. That's why I said this morning, the Christian should be the supreme optimist. Demas could well have been Demetrius. We have no evidence of that. It's a shortened form of it. But the Christian being as they are, the different theologians, could this be? No, it just says simply, Demas has forsaken me. He has abandoned me. He has left me in a strait. But you see, the theologians over centuries have said, this could be Demetrius. Because we know that brother that John wrote of was a godly brother and finished his days well. The Christian message is a message of hope. Yes. A message of hope. Praise God. The time of my departure is at hand. Verse 7 says this, I have, a lot of things Paul's got, I have fought a good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. As Jeff said in his conversation to Neil, in front of Ruth, he said it to me, in front of Ruth as well. No regrets. No regrets. I'd have him more than anything else. No regrets. What a wonderful thing. When you think of the valley that he came out of losing his daughter, no regrets. How God is able to undertake in this, isn't it? I have fought a good fight. Satisfied. That's what he speaks of, isn't it? Satisfaction. I fought a good fight. I gave it my best. Sometimes our best isn't good enough. Sometimes God says, oh, it's the best I've ever come across. I fought a good fight. I finished the race. I said this morning, isn't it? It's easier to start a race than to finish a race. It's easier to start a fight than to finish a fight. I can't think of a time that I ever started a fight. Can't think of a time. Even when I won a fight, I cried. I cried. I remember I sat on top of the boy. I can see it now. He lived around the corner from me. I had him by the scruff here. And I had him and my fist was raised and I looked at him and I just cried. It's easier to start than it is to finish. Are we stickers? Are we endurance people? We tend to think that as we get a little bit older, we can't do the things that we used to be able to do. The funny thing is, when you read of these Iron Men, if you read about the Iron Man, we should do it showed at Christmas time. I think it's something like a 50-mile walk, double marathon. So it's a double run. Some ridiculous distance of cycling. I think it's something like 100 miles. And then a 2-mile swim. So it's 2-mile swim, then the cycle, and then the run. But the funny thing is, it was never youngsters that won it. It was men in their late 30s, and I think one man from America won it at over 40 years of age. Because the body adapts to that type of endurance. It's easier to start a race than to finish. Are you running the race? I've kept the faith. Apparently. I hope this is not preacher's license. Apparently, the athletes before those early day Olympics, would take a vow that they were fully trained and would not cheat. I've kept the faith. Whether that be so or what, I don't know. But I fought a good fight. I've kept the faith. I finished the race. No regrets. No regrets. It was what Paul wrote, that we should endeavour to have a good conscience. A good conscience. There is a peace that can rest on the Christian's life at the end. It says, I'm at peace with him, and he's at peace with me. Some of the things that Paul had, verse 16 to 17. At my first defense, no one stood with me, all forsook me, but the Lord stood with me. If you go through the verses, it says simply there, he stood with me. He strengthened me. He delivered me. He preserved me. What God does, when that promise holds true, I will never leave you, nor forsake you. When it holds true like that, when everyone has forsaken, you remember what he said concerning those that were with him. Only Luke now is with me. Only Luke. But the Lord stood with me. He stood with me. Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, O help of the helpless, abide with me. He stood with me, he strengthened me, he delivered me, he preserved me. This is what Mr. Wesley said on his deathbed. He raised his hands towards the heavens, nearly at 90 years of age. He had almost spread the whole of the century. He raised his hands to the heavens and said this almost as a last breath, and best of all, God is with us. And his eyes closed and rested. Oh, he will. He stood with me, having loved them. He loved them to the end. And so we find with this year that Jesus, that most best of friends, I mentioned this morning, may I introduce you to the greatest of all friends that will stand by you. Paul lived like Christ. We read that in the New Testament a number of times, and he says to me, do what I do, and you'll be fine. You just follow what I've done, and you'll be on the right road. He lived like Christ. But when you come to 2 Timothy 4, it seems that he died like Christ as well. Some of the different phrases that he comes up with. I was watching that, the one professor, he's a young man, Reeves I think his name, I think it's Dr. Reeves, I think he's got that program on BBC about the different cultures in the world. And he was in one part, I think, I can't remember, it was in some Latin country, it may well have been Spain or Italy, or it may be down in the south of America. And it talked of a Father Pia, P-I-A, Pia. And it shows in the church that honours him, that you have a statue of the crucifixion of Christ, and he is crucified on top of him. And he says, well, this seems to stretch the Christian doctrine too much. But in one sense, Paul was going to die like the Lord Jesus. Because we find comparisons between what was on the Lord's mind and what was on Paul's mind. What was on Jesus' mind when he died? Why have you forsaken me? Paul says, all have forsaken me. Jesus, in that psalm, granted that he would have only said, that, as far as we understand, the verse, my God, why have you forsaken me? But if you go through the psalm then of what it contains, it goes on to say, none. There's no one to help me. Paul says, but the Lord stood with me. Then he goes on to say, Jesus in that psalm would have said, I've been saved from the lion. Paul writes, I've been delivered out of the mouth of the lion. Jesus would have been conscious of, in Psalm 22, all the ends of the earth shall turn to the Lord. Paul, in his letter here, speaks of this, that all the Gentiles might hear. And then he goes on to say again, in the psalm, dominion belongs to the Lord. In other words, the rule, the kingdom belongs to him. This is what Paul says. He will preserve me for his heavenly kingdom. He lived like Jesus. He died like Jesus. Not in the sense for sins, for himself or for others. I don't mean that. I don't mean that silliness of the man that is pictured crucified with Christ on the same cross. And I'm not talking, that's incorrect. But as Jesus lived, so Paul lived. As Jesus died, so Paul died. A life poured out. Are we ready to meet our God? For Amos the prophet says this, prepare to meet your God. Paul at this time was ready. When we shall see him, what shall be our response? We shall be like him. Amen. What a blessed hope, isn't it? What a blessed hope. Are you ready to meet your God as Paul was? Amen. Thank you for your time and patience.